weren't for President Obama, we might not have done the intelligence community assessment that we did that set off a whole sequence of events which are still unfolding today, notably Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. President Obama is responsible for that, and it was he who tasked us to do that intelligence community assessment in the first place.
Hi, this is Pastor Joe Green, head pastor of Antioch Assembly Church located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Also, the founder of the 2019 movement, and I'm going to share a couple of thoughts with you. You know, I was recently watching the summit that was taking place over in Europe, and more specifically, they had this conversation between President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, who is the head of the president of Russia. And, you know, there's a lot of backlash. There's a lot of you know, the media and social media is up in a frenzy about this. And I'm going to address black people. I'm not just going to address everybody, but more specifically black people. I'm going to address America as a whole, but more specifically black people. Because if you know about the 2019 movement, if you know about a lot of the things we've been talking about recently, we've been addressing people of color. More specifically because people of color have the greatest need at this point in time, and being a person of color, you know, I think it's only fitting that I address the people of color first. Now, with the recent events of the conference in Switzerland, there's a lot of backlash because many people tried to suggest, or they tried to interpret President Trump's comments as though he was siding with Russia over the United States, but more specifically the United States intelligence agencies. Now, the most intriguing thing I saw about that is many black people are even supporting or defending the intelligence agencies, and even accuse President Trump of being somewhat treasonous. And if you recall, there was some time ago, a couple of years ago, President Trump did openly say that he didn't completely trust the U.S. intelligence agencies. Now, the reason that I'm going to comment on that is because, you know, black people, we're being manipulated. We are very much unsophisticated, uneducated, and really not understanding what's going on from a larger scheme. What they've done over the last couple of decades is they've made black people, not just the last couple of decades, but it's becoming more prevalent over the last few decades. They've made black people emotional, lower level thinkers, and we do stuff from a knee-jerk reaction, and we pretty much regurgitate what the mainstream media is giving us in these particular areas. And I'm going to talk about that, especially in regards to the intelligence agency. Now, any black person who studies history, who've been paying attention, you know, there's a lot of people who say that they're woke now, but most people that say that they're woke, they're only repeating what mainstream media and the culture at large is giving them to repeat. For you to be completely against President Donald Trump, it's because you're repeating what the media is telling you. You're repeating the narratives that you have been given, and you're ignoring things from a larger social and cultural and historical perspective. And so that's why I want to talk about things. We're about 4 or 5 levels below the actual scheme and plans that's going on. You know, a lot of black people talk about white supremacy and how they're against white supremacy, but the same people that say that they're against white supremacy and claim that they're woke, they actually support all the actual strategies of white supremacy, which is why I know and understand that they don't know they don't know the game. They don't understand what's going on. They have a lack of historical knowledge, and they really are being manipulated by the narrative that they're being given. Now, so that's why in this talk I'm talking about how black people are putting people, personalities, and politics over principles. I'm going to say that again. We're putting people, personalities, and politics over principles. See, a person who's non-principled is easily manipulated. And because black people are not standing on principles, but we're standing on standing for personalities, and we're putting people above principles. we're being easily manipulated. That's the path of destruction. Even from a biblical standpoint, you know, the Bible says that God's no respecter of persons, which means that God doesn't love people over biblical principles. And so when you ignore biblical principles or even principles, you're easy target for the enemy, and that's why we're being manipulated. That's why we're sliding down the totem, the totem of the social hierarchy. That's why we're less and less relevant, because we stand for people and personalities and principles over principles, and that's why the powers that be use those things in order to manipulate us and keep us in bondage. And we're actually at the point where we are defending all the tools of white supremacy that's meant to be against us. Now, I'm not a big, if you follow the 2019 movement, if you follow my YouTube channel, I'm not huge on the whole concept of white supremacy, because I think that it's a misnomer. I think it's something that has been given to black people. They've been running with it. You haven't heard about white supremacy until recently, because the strategies that they're supporting, the same people that say that they're against white supremacy, most of them are supporting the very strategies that are implemented by white supremacy. So let's talk about this for a little bit. Black people are easily manipulated because the mainstream media is pushing a globalist agenda, because most people don't understand actually what globalism means. They don't understand the goal of globalism, and they don't understand how detrimental globalism is. They think that racism is the #1 threat to black America, and it's not. It's globalism. Because you have to understand the people behind globalism are the ruling elite, and to them it's not about black and white. It's about the ruling elite versus the rest of the world, and they use the race card, they use the fight between black and white in order to manipulate the common man so that they can push their overall agenda. So we're so busy fighting against what we call dog whistle rhetoric and the rebel flag and statues in Charlottesville and the like. We're so busy fighting against those trivial things that we are still being manipulated and being oppressed and being destroyed by the strategy of the white supremacists. I mean, they have us so fooled to believe that President Donald Trump is the biggest threat to black America, even though every year hundreds of people get killed in every inner city in America. In each inner city, Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, we get killed, massacred, aborted at millions per year, and has been the case for many decades. But yet black people are so naive and so manipulated and deceived that they believe that President Trump and his rhetoric is the biggest threat to black America. That's how I know that we are unsophisticated. We're lower level emotional thinkers. And I'm not saying that to insult us, because I love black people. I've been fighting and working in the black community for a long time. But what I will say is it's time for us to wake up. So I'm going to show you a video clip of how there's a historic battle, if you will, between the United States intelligence agencies and black people. But because we're so focused on identity politics and personalities, and because we become emotional, lower level thinkers, we ignore facts and data and history, that we are actually, you know, we're ignoring what actually happens. Black people have always been in opposition to the U.S. intelligence agency, but because we've been told that President Donald Trump is our biggest enemy, we're actually defending the long-term enemy of black people.
I don't know if you have seen this. I don't want to blindside you with this. This is the latest statement, latest tweet, as you were just saying, President-elect's latest unsolicited pronouncement on the intelligence community. This was his tweet just a little while ago tonight. You see the scare quotes there. The intelligence briefing on so-called Russian hacking was delayed until Friday. Perhaps more time needed to build a case. Very strange. We're actually told, intelligence sources tell NBC News, since this tweet has been posted, that actually this intelligence briefing for the president-elect was always planned for Friday. It hasn't been delayed. Okay. But he's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
What do you think the intelligence community would do if they were more?
I don't know, but from what I am told, they are very upset with how he has treated them and talked about them. And we need the intelligence community. We don't know what's going on. Look at the Russian hacking. Without the intelligence community, we wouldn't have discovered it.
Do you think he has an agenda to try to dismantle parts of the intelligence community? I mean, this form of taunting, hostility.
Whether you're a super liberal Democrat or a very conservative Republican, you should be against dismantling the intelligence community.
Depression, repression, in the air, layoff, hunger, and poverty, stricken everywhere. So much killing, stealing, and dying going on. The man started saying, I ain't did no wrong, taking out the leaders, one by one, take away my livelihood. Making me run, all this killing and misgiving. When is it going to end?
Any black leader with charisma was a target of the government's COINTELPRO program. And that's stated in their own objectives of the program.
Who are you? You don't know. Don't tell me Negro, that's nothing. What were you before the white man named you a Negro? And where were you? And what did you have? What was yours? What language did you speak then? What was your name? It couldn't have been Smith or Jones or Bunch or Powell. That wasn't your name. They don't have those kind of names where you and I came from. No, what was your name? And why don't you now know what your name was then? Where did it go? Where did you lose it? Who took it? And how did he take it? What tongue did you speak? How did the man take your tongue? Where is your history? How did the man wipe out your history? How did the man, what did the man do to make you as dumb as you are right now?
To kill the brother because he had began to take meaningful steps towards gaining the freedom for his people. He was taking steps to internationalize the black man's struggle and to take it to the United Nations, to take it diplomatically to the other countries around the world so that meaningful pressure could be brought to bear on the United States government and to force them to let his people go.
We can't prove for sure that the FBI COINTELPRO program or an agent of the FBI actually killed Malcolm X. They were certainly trying to reach that end. They were articulating that goal, and they were taking steps in furtherance of that, trying to cause the exact same thing to happen which happened. So we can step back from it and say, regardless of their success, whether they were the ones who pulled the trigger, this gives us an idea of what their intent was, what they were willing to do, what their political viewpoint was, and what ends, and what unconstitutional and violent ends they were willing to adopt and use in order to reach their goal, which was to destroy progressive movements.
Today I want to say to the people of America and the nations of the world that we are not about to turn around. Yes, sir. We are on the move now. Yes, sir. Yes, we're on the move, and no wave of racism can stop us. Yes, sir. The burning of our churches will not deter us. Yes, sir. The bombing of our homes will not dissuade us. Yes, sir. The beating and killing of our clergymen and young people will not divert us. Yes, sir. The wanton release of their known murderers will not discourage us. We're on the move now. Yes, sir.
So again, we cannot say for sure that James Earl Ray was working for the FBI. What we can say for sure is that the FBI had an intent shown by their programs against Dr. King, showed by the document I talked about preventing the rise of messiahs like Dr. King, that they wanted that to happen, and that they had again taken very active steps to do that. So then when Dr. King is killed a month after this document comes out, and after all of the attempts to get him to discredit him and to disrupt his organization, and in fact to have him do physical violence to himself and have others do physical violence to him, I mean, it becomes almost irrelevant whether they pulled the trigger or not. Because we know that they did pull the trigger on Fred Hampton.
We have to defend ourselves. We intend to defend ourselves. We did so in the past, and we're going to do it today, and the day after that, and the day after that. Because only through this proper example of the self-defense and the proper example of retaliation, and by letting these people know that we move from some basic laws, that anything that goes down on the oppressed people on the part of the oppressor, it should be reciprocal. And in plain proletarian workers' language, it takes two to tango. As soon as these motherfuckers go, we go.
Fred Hampton was only 20 years old, but he had the ability to really move people, to speak in a way that got people going, that effectively seemed to energize them.
He was beginning to develop a following, throughout the country, and he was a direct threat to the power structure that oppressed people.
People learn by example. I don't think anybody has an argument with that. I think that when Huey P. Newton said that people learn basically by observation and participation, I think that everybody caught on to that. So what we're saying very simply is that if they learn by observation and participation, that we need to do more acting than we need to do writing. And I think the Black Panther Party is doing that. That we didn't talk about a Breakfast for Children program, we've got one. We're not going to tell you how many kids we intend to feed in Chicago. We're feeding 3,000 to 4,000 every week already, and I don't know how many all around the country. We're not talking about beginning to think about treating people free when they need medical services. We're opening a free health clinic in the city of Chicago in less than 3 weeks. These are the type of examples that people can relate to.
The immediate, violent, criminal reaction of the occupants in shooting at announced police officers emphasizes the extreme viciousness of the Black Panther Party. So does their refusal to cease firing at the police officers when urged to do so several times.
Ed Hanrahan, who was the political heir apparent of Mayor Daley, wanted to take credit for having killed this Black Panther leader. So he went on television, and he went on television explaining how Fred Hampton had come out of his bedroom firing a pistol, and how all the Panthers inside had repeatedly broken ceasefires and repeatedly fired at the police. The problem is when you fire a bullet, two things happen. You have a shell that comes from your gun, and you have a bullet that comes out the other end. When the evidence was all gathered, it turned out that all the shells that were found in the apartment came from police weapons, with the possible exception of one. All the bullet holes, the directions of those bullet holes, were all coming inside from outside. That is, showed that they were fired by the police. So that all of the evidence that Hanrahan said, all the evidence that was gathered proved that it was the police who fired, not the Panthers. Hanrahan went even further and actually pointed to places on the back door, which he said were evidence in pictures that the Panthers fired. The press themselves, when they looked closely at these pictures and returned to the scene, discovered that these were in fact nail heads and weren't bullet holes at all. The federal government at first appeared to be coming in and do a neutral investigation. And what the federal government did find, of course, was that it was the police and not the Panthers who had fired. Well, under their cover, though, the federal government, under the cover of appearing neutral, the federal government hid their own role, which was that it was their informant who had gotten a floor plan of the apartment, and their informant had given their floor plan to Ed Hanrahan's raiders.
I was supposed to be one of the murdered Panthers, okay? However, my plans changed that evening, and the informant, William O'Neill, was unaware of the change in plans that I had made. So my plans had changed, and I was not in the apartment. Oh, I was in the apartment early, but I left the apartment. And so I wasn't there. So they went to Plan 2 in order to get rid of me. They raided my apartment the next morning on December 5th, shot my door down, and they thought that I was in the apartment.
There had been a systematic effort by the FBI in Chicago and nationally to destroy the Panthers. Previously, the FBI in Chicago had sent a letter to the head of the El Rukns, Jeff Fort, telling him the Panthers were trying to assassinate him. Didn't he want to take some action to prevent that? They had deliberately attempted to provoke things between the Panthers and other groups and attempted to discredit the Panthers publicly.
They didn't have to kill every leader. All they had to do was kill one of the most important and up-and-coming and messianic leaders who was doing what Fred Hampton was doing, to send the message to all those young folks, whether they be black or white or Latin or whatever, who wanted to get involved in the struggle, that these are this is the game that you're getting involved in. We'll kill you in your bed.
I think during different periods the government uses different tactics, you know, and sometimes their methods will be to publicly discredit groups, to jail people. We saw that sometimes with regard to the Wobblies. They actually did kill people. We saw with regard to the Communist Party, they frequently would jail people or attempt to ruin their reputations. I think with regard to the black movement in particular, the escalation of the government's attacks was very clear. And I think assassination, setting people up for internecine rivalries which could lead to deaths, I think the government has shown a willingness to use any form of violence that it felt was necessary.
So, when we talk people over principles, the case in point is President Barack Obama. President Barack Obama was one of the greatest tools of the global elite that we've ever seen in the black community. And the reason I say that is because Republicans are irrelevant to our cause, because we haven't supported Republicans for about 50 years. Since the big switch happened in the 60s and early 70s, that black people who were historically Republicans, because Republicans were the anti-slavery party and the Democrats were the party of the KKK, because of that switch that happened in the 60s and the 70s, we now have been passionately supporting the Democrats, even though we've gotten nothing from that. So I'm only addressing that particular issue because the Republicans are relevant, because we're not passionately supporting the Republicans. You know, we passionately supported President Barack Obama, who was supposed to be a man of color. We got nothing for 8 years. He looked out for the Mexicans. He looked out for the LGBT. He looked out for everybody else but black people. But because we're so brainwashed, we didn't hold him accountable. Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, Eric Garner, all those people got killed during the time of President Obama. And we had a black president and a black Attorney General who was the #1 law enforcement agent in the country. We had, both of them were people of color, but yet they didn't come to our defense. But because we're so brainwashed, we didn't expect them to help us. We expected to be overlooked, but now we've been triggered to think that, okay, Trump is the issue. Now we got to fight. So the last 8 years with President Obama, we didn't have to fight. We were neglected and you know, we were sliding down the totem pole because our situation got worse under Obama, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. And because we're caught in emotions, I hear black people saying he was the greatest president ever. He did nothing for black people. Nothing, absolutely nothing. You know, the unemployment rate in black America went from 2 times the national average to 3 times. You had all these open cases of black people getting shot down in cold blood, but yet the president nor the attorney general, who was both black, whether it's Eric Holder or Loretta Lynch, they didn't do anything, and they had not only the authority but the responsibility to look out for us, but they didn't. And because we're so brainwashed, we said, oh, it's because they don't have any real power. But yet now we think that, oh, well, President Trump has real power. Why is that? If the president doesn't have any real power and Obama couldn't do anything because he has no power, how do you think all of a sudden Trump has power? Nothing changed in the office of president. And the only laws and regulations that President Trump moved into were the ones that Obama helped to perpetuate or to create. So anyway, let's look at some facts here, because facts do matter, right, over emotions and lack of principles. So you have to understand what's called the Boule effect. The Boule effect is the ruling class of black people. So you have people like Oprah, you have these gatekeepers that are there. President Obama was one of them. They're gatekeepers. And the reason they're gatekeepers is because the powers that be, the power base, the ruling elite, the oligarchy, they identify people from the black community. They elevate them and promote them and use them in order to manipulate the rest of the black people. So people like Oprah and all these other people, these high-level athletes, they don't really do anything for the black community. We have the platform, we have the resources, and we have the ability to change black communities. You look at all the professional athletes that are worth millions and millions and billions of dollars who live in these communities. Nothing changes. Oprah's a billionaire. Chicago hasn't changed since Oprah's been in power. In her respective platform. President Obama was the president. He's from Chicago. But Chicago was a war zone, one of the worst places in the world to live for black people. Yet you had a black president who says he's from Chicago, but he did nothing for the black people, and black people didn't hold him accountable. Because they told you not to get upset with him. The power base told you not to get upset with President Obama because he was okay, and because of that, you took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. Now, if you understand the Boule effect, like I said, you have the ruling elite. They give you hope, right? Jay-Z and Beyonce, they give you hope, and they say if you work hard, you can make it. And so people aspire to be that. Now you have these ratchet gangster rappers. You have all these different, you have Lil Wayne, you have Lil Boosie, Kevin Gates, Tekashi 6ix9ine. I'm just naming some. What they do is they give them all this wealth and they give them a platform, and these people still manipulate you. So these young boys are emulating these people. They say, if I can be a gangster rapper, I can be hood, I can be part of a gang, that's how I'm going to get wealthy. And it's all fake. Jay-Z was promoted by the powers that be to give black people hope. He's not a great businessman. He has been chosen by the ruling elite, and they promote those people. When they wanted to build a stadium in Brooklyn, a basketball arena, and they moved the Brooklyn Nets from New Jersey to Brooklyn, they put Jay-Z and they said, hey, he's a part owner of the Brooklyn Nets, and we want to build a stadium, the Barclays Center. So Jay-Z went around to the black people and said, yeah, we're bringing the Nets home, and I'm one of you. I'm from Marcy Projects. I'm from Brooklyn. And so he went, and the people that own houses in that area gave up their houses because they said, yeah, we're in now. Jay-Z's in. And he really wasn't an owner. He had such a small percentage, but he was used as a front runner. That's the Boule effect. They used them as a forerunner, as a personality on the front end, and black people buy it hook, line, and sinker because they say he's one of us, and we give up our principles. We don't stand for our principles. And because of that, we're always taken advantage of. During the Civil Rights Movement, and now, when we're talking about the intelligence agency, they had a thing called Counterintelligence or COINTELPRO, Counterintelligence Program. And what they would do is they would actually use the intelligence agencies, and they would infiltrate different organizations to manipulate and control black people, and keep the civil rights movement from being that effective. Many people believe, which I'm a part of that, is that Martin Luther King Jr. was actually co-opted. He was, they come in and they infiltrate these movements, and they control the effectiveness of the movement, and so they don't really go but so far. Malcolm X, they assassinated him, and when I say they, the power structure made sure he got assassinated, because he was being very effective. He was bringing black people together, and he wasn't compromising their principles. And because of that, they didn't recognize him as a leader. He got assassinated, and they made him as though he was very violent. The Black Panthers the same way. And the things that I'm saying to you, it's not speculation. I'll say this all the time. It's not speculations or assumptions. I have all the documentation to show what I'm talking about. So let me show you just a couple of pieces of information. So I got this from the FBI website. Okay, there's a thing called the FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act, which means government documents after a certain period of time have to be declassified. Once they're declassified, you as an American citizen have the right to request these documents. And when you get these documents, you can see what actually was happening. So this is from a FOIA request. I didn't do the request, but I researched it online. And it was back in 1967, I believe it was called the Black Extremists, the Federal of Information and Privacy Act. The subject was COINTELPRO, the Black Extremists. Now I'm going to tell you why it's so ridiculous for Black America to be defending the U.S. Intelligence Agency, but it just shows when you have actual facts, it helps you to show or to demonstrate that where people's hearts are. So black people aren't really looking for truth. They are being manipulated emotionally, and so their principles vary with the people and the personalities and the parties that they support. So you had the COINTELPRO, and I'm going to read a little bit of that. Let me see, where did I do with it? This is public information, so it's not anything I've come up with. Okay, so this is from the FBI's records for the COINTELPRO. The COINTELPRO program, which was designated black nationalist groups as hate groups, it said to consolidate their forces or to recruit new or youthful adherents that are frustrated. No opportunity should be missed to exploit through counterintelligence techniques the organizations and personal conflicts of the leaderships of the groups, and where possible an effort should be made to capitalize upon existing conflicts between competing black nationalist organizations. When an opportunity is apparent to disrupt or neutralize black nationalist hate-type organizations through cooperation or of established local news media contacts or through such contact with sources available to the seat of government. And it reads, this is the FBI documents. It reads, many individuals currently active in the black nationalist organizations have backgrounds of immorality, subversive activity, and criminal records. Through your investigation of key agitators, you should endeavor to establish their unsavory backgrounds, be alert to determine evidence of misappropriation of funds or other types of personal misconduct on the part of the militant nationalist leaders, so any practical or warranted counterintelligence may be instituted. So they would do background checks on them, and anytime they found out that they had some kind of, perversion, sexual deviance, or anything like that, or misappropriation of funds, they would use it to blackmail them. One of the things that, if you ever see J. Edgar Hoover, who was a big enemy of Martin Luther King, he actually blackmailed Martin Luther King, and he had some tapes of Martin Luther King in some sexually perverse situations, and he wanted to use it for blackmail, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But I want you to see that counterintelligence programs was part of the intelligence agencies to subvert the black civil rights movements. So you had the Black Panthers. If you look at Fred Hampton, he was one. They also had this thing called, well, let me read this to you. I don't want you to say it's my opinion. Counterintelligence program, black nationalist hate groups. Officers receiving copies of the letter are instructed to immediately establish a control file captioned as above and to assign responsibility to the following in coordinating this new counterintelligence program to an experienced and imaginative special agent well versed in investigations relating to black nationalists and hate type organizations. The field office file under this program may be maintained in a pending and active status until such time as a specific operation and technique is placed under consideration and implementation. The purpose of this new counterintelligence endeavor is to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of black nationalists, hate-type organizations and groupings, their leadership, spokesmen, membership, supporters, to counter their propensity for violence and civil disorder. The activities of all such groups of intelligence interest, this Bureau must be followed on a continuous basis so that will be in a position to promptly take advantage of all opportunities for counterintelligence and to inspire action in instances where circumstances warrant. Now, this is the cities and the groups that they targeted. This is, again, this is declassified FBI documents. It's not my opinion. These are some of the cities that they were, well, these are the cities they listed here. And this is dated August 29th, 1967. Atlanta, Baltimore, Boston, Buffalo, Charlotte, Chicago, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Detroit, Jackson, Los Angeles, Memphis, Newark, New Orleans, New York, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Pittsburgh, Richmond, St. Louis, San Francisco, and Washington field office. And it says all this information contained herein is unclassified except where it showed otherwise. So they have what's called, when they black out the certain information, when they have specific people's names. If you see that on the top, they blacked out certain information. The rest of it is declassified information. And it's interesting because if you look at all those cities that have a high black population, they have a high crime rate, they have a high unwed pregnancy rate, they have low academic achievement in the urban areas, you have high crime, drug use, and all that other stuff. So if the FBI is concentrating on those cities to focus on black groups, isn't it ironic that those are some of the cities that black people have the worst living conditions? I don't think that's a coincidence. If you've been following the 2019 movement and subscribing to my YouTube channel, you'll see why that is. Now, this is an article from Ebony Magazine that was April 5th, 2017. It says, here's why the FBI's tweets about MLK's assassination was problematic. So in 2017, the FBI gave a tweet to positively commend MLK, but yet when you look at the FBI's records and how they investigated Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, J. Edgar Hoover was an enemy of MLK, and he actually wrote a letter to MLK trying to encourage him to commit suicide.
As far back as the 1920s, when he began as FBI director, Hoover had gone after persons like Marcus Garvey. Garvey's organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, had a membership numbering in the millions, and somehow Hoover found this threatening and worthy of surveillance and undermining attempts. Garvey's influence had been international and had drawn world attention to America's treatment of black people. Paul Robeson was another who was viewed by Hoover as an enemy. This reporter has personally examined thousands of FBI, CIA, and other U.S. government agency documents that were kept on Paul Robeson. Robeson, like Garvey, had an international audience at his command, and he used that platform to denounce racism in the United States.
Most importantly, however, were the questions raised by the State Department as to my political opinion. Here's a question of whether one who wants to sing and act can have, as a citizen, political opinion. And in attacking me, they suggested that when I was abroad, I spoke out against injustices to the Negro people in the United States. I certainly did. And the Supreme Court Justice just ruled, Judge Warren, in the segregation cases, that world opinion had a lot to do with that ruling, that our children, Negro children, can go to school like anybody else in the South. I'm very proud to have been a part of directing world opinion to precisely that condition. The second, that I fight for the independence of the colonial peoples of Africa. Bandung, the colored peoples of the world assembled and made it clear that nobody is going to tell them what to do. They're going to have the independence. I'm proud of that.
When the 60s came, many factions of the civil rights movement had developed the same international perspective.
Those of us living in the United States who see ourselves as, and who are in fact, you know, descendants of the Africans who were brought to this country, who were enslaved, and who were rebelling and revolting now against our oppressive condition, and we are concerned about Africa. We see Africa as our motherland, and we feel that we have a responsibility to speak with as much passion as any other African on this issue. The United States government says that change must come in South Africa through peaceful means. That same government has over 500,000 troops in Vietnam fighting not white people, but brown Vietnamese.
So it is small wonder that the civil rights movement was also subjected to heavy attack by Hoover. Billions of government dollars were spent in this direction. Many of these activities were not only unwarranted, but of questionable legality. The congressional hearings into the assassination of Dr. King bore this out. 2 FBI agents testified before a Senate committee chaired by Senator Frank Church.
I'm trying to find out what it was that impelled some part of the FBI to pursue Martin Luther King with such an obsession. And what I understood that answer to be is, first of all, it was not any suspicions of the commission of a federal crime. None of the literature showed up a single suggestion that Martin Luther King had committed or was about to commit a crime. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, Senator, but at this point, much of what was being done did involve challenges to local laws. And there is a very strong suggestion that King was seen as rallying the lawbreakers and would-be lawbreakers, albeit for a cause that sounded pure. I'm looking now in terms of, if we look at what might have gotten the Bureau started, and if we remember at the same time he is extremely critical of the Bureau's own law enforcement efforts. We see throughout these documents and the New Left documents that it is taboo to criticize the Bureau and particularly the director.
Well, was he ever charged with fomenting violence? Did he ever participate in violence? Was it ever alleged that he was about to be violent?
That was the very opposite of his philosophy, Senator.
So that it was neither the fear of commission of a crime or the commission of violence. Was there any serious charge that he himself was a communist?
No such charge ever was made.
So that what was left then was a decision on the part of some persons or person within the FBI that he should nevertheless be pursued.
And replaced.
And the basis for that apparently was political. The decision that he was dangerous or potentially dangerous to someone's notion of what this country should be doing, and a further theory that the FBI possessed the ability to enter into this field and to investigate and to intimidate and seek to neutralize and indeed replace a civil rights leader that they thought to be politically unacceptable. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Cameras missed their shot of the latest high-profile arrivals to Trump Tower. The United States top intelligence officials opted for the private entrance for this highly anticipated briefing to set out their case that Russia interfered with the 2016 election. The day after officials gave the first public hearing about Russian hacking, and just hours before his briefing with them, Donald Trump continued to dismiss their conclusions, saying it's all part of a political witch hunt.